Hi there. If you are of a certain age and you find yourself wondering if you're on the autism spectrum, or if you have a loved one who you wonder if they are, then I welcome you to join me through my journey here. Hi, my name is Randy. I'm the Autistic Grandpa. And through this series of videos, I'm trying to show you my journey into being diagnosed with autism in my 60s, having not thought about it all my life, and how I've been able to navigate that. I'm not trying with these to diagnose you, because that's certainly a professional diagnosis, and I'm not an expert. I'm just learning. I'm just starting to get into this. But when I was diagnosed and I started looking through YouTube, there wasn't a lot of options for people like us who are of a certain age. I'm in my 60s, but it applied to anybody in their 50s, 60s, even 70s, maybe even late 40s, just because we've kind of passed that time where we would have been diagnosed. So in my last video, I told you my 7 top traits that kind of put me in the diagnosis scale. But I just want to add a few more that also I have. Maybe they didn't rise to the top quite as much, but they still are there. I said from the first time, one of the things is I'm a loner. And just because you're a loner doesn't mean you're on the spectrum. Sorry, on the autism spectrum. There's a lot of people who just like to be alone, but it's just one of those things added with everything else. I have little interest in making friends, and it doesn't mean I don't like people, and doesn't mean people don't like me. But I have little interest in having a friend that comes and barbecues with me, or I go paint their house, or something like that. Um, I just, I love my family, and that's about all I need. I prefer solitary activities, and I I don't form long term attachments. Another trait is disliking ambiguity. I don't want to try to figure out what you mean or what you want me to do. Just be direct. Even if it's not comfortable or something I don't want, just be direct. Don't make me try to figure out what you're talking about. I've always been analytical as another trait. A lot of people are analytical, but I excelled in math, and so that's another thing that put me as one of the traits that helped me just find out that I was um, on the spectrum. In math, I mean, I remember from an early stage, like third grade, I was doing fourth and fifth grade math books, but I wasn't necessarily excelling in other areas. This is one I'm not really sure if it's a uh, a trait assigned to autism. I couldn't find it anywhere, but I have to believe it is. Is I tear up really easily, and that doesn't mean I'm just crying and the tears are coming down. It just means I get choked up at things that normal people wouldn't get choked up on. Uh, if I can be choked up at someone performing well on American Idol, and I'll tear up. Or I remember my strangest one was I had moved into a new house. We'd planted grass, and I came around the corner of the street, and I could see the grass was coming up. And I remember tearing up. And it's just like, who does that? I call it an adult male crier's disease, but it's not a full out cry. I just kind of get teary eyed and choke up, and it's hard to talk for a little bit. Not sure what that is. I think it's weird. One that I'm not proud of that I've learned to know that I have is a lack of empathy for most people except my immediate family. Um, I didn't really realize it until I look back and thinking, my immediate family, boy, I'm all over them, not hurting or trying to fix their problems or whatever. But outside of my family, maybe I'm not as empathetic as I need to be to the world in general, to my community. And that's something I could work on, but it doesn't come naturally. Oh, a weird sense of time. I have a weird sense of time. I can be out traveling on the road, and my wife can call and say, "When are you going to be home?" And I said, 3:30. And well, that's 3 hours away. Yeah. I mean, I have a sense of when I'm going to be places, even closer. How long is it going to take to get over there? 15 minutes. Tell them we'll be there in 7 minutes, and it usually works out. And I don't know if I have some kind of inner clock that does that, or if I just adjust my driving to fit the need or what. But anyway, I think it's kind of weird. And I can also pretty much always tell people what time it is without looking at my watch, or I don't even carry a watch. But if someone said, "Hey, what time do you think it is?" 3:35. and it will be. Along those lines, when I listen to music, and I'm not sure, I didn't see this in the traits either, but it's got to be something associated with that, is I can hear a song on the radio or on a CD or on CD, that's old fashioned, um, or on iTunes that that I can hear as a whole, but I can also hear it as individual parts on the instruments. So I hear a song and I hear, okay, there's the rhythm guitar, there's the lead guitar, there's the drums, there's a keyboard, and it may be some strings. I can't tell if it's strings or keyboard. Certainly hear the bass going. It's like I can hear all of these. But I haven't ran across other people that do that. So leave that in your comments if you're one of those people that do that, because I haven't run across anybody like that. Motor skills. This was a hard one because I've always loved sports, but I knew that I wasn't super athletic. But at least I thought I was somewhat athletic. But it wasn't until I started looking back and I probably wasn't as good as I thought I was. And throwing has always been an issue. Throwing rocks. I mean, they just my friends are throwing them over the lake, and I'm dunk going straight down, and it always bugged me as a kid. Or throwing a baseball, trying to throw it from first to third is almost impossible. I have to rear back so far, and I just can't. It's just a motor skill issue. I can become overwhelmed in stressful situations and just kind of shut down. An example of this is there was one time when I was finishing my basement. I was working full time and going to school to get my MBA all at the same time, aside from work, helping with the family. And I remember being down in the basement and I was hammering something and the hammer slipped out a little bit and it just caught me at the wrong time and I just fell apart. I I won't say I was laying in a fetal position, but that's what spiritually or emotionally I felt like. It's just like I was so overwhelmed. And then the last one I was going to talk about, that can also be kind of blunt, and that's not a desirable trait. But sometimes when people ask me questions, I'm going to tell them what I think. Hey, does my breast stink? Yeah. Hey, what would you like me to do? Get out of my way. I don't like that I'm like that, but that is, I like it when people are like that to me. I don't, like I said earlier, I don't want to be guessing I don't like ambiguity. So these are all more traits that I wanted to add on to the last video. It's interesting to me, and maybe this happened to you, that when I heard when I was diagnosed with autism, I thought about myself as a kid and stuff. And I remember that it was always odd to me that in first grade, my parents got called in and they were talking to my parents about holding me back in first grade. Well, we didn't. And then third grade came along and they called them in and they were wanting to put me ahead in fourth grade. And it never made sense to me until now, until I was diagnosed, that yeah, I had the intellectual skills early on, but I didn't have the social skills, and that's probably why they wanted to hold me back. But by the time I got third grade, everything kind of, you know, the intellectual skills was enough. So, but hopefully, as you go through your journey, you can find these. I encourage you to go all over YouTube and look at, or all over the internet and look at the traits associated with being on the spectrum. But I hope that these videos for you are helping you. Please leave comments if you think it pertains to you, or if you're not sure if I'm up in the night or what. I'd love to hear from you. And I've got a couple more videos. The next one's going to be on things that don't apply to me, because there's certainly a number of traits that simply just don't apply. All right. We'll catch you next time, and appreciate you giving me some time.